Hola, muy buenas tardes. A nombre del Consejo de la Cultura y las Artes de Nuevo León, la Fototeca del Centro de las Artes les da la más cordial bienvenida a este 19 Encuentro de Fotografía, en donde tendremos 3 días de fiesta de la imagen, en donde tendremos actividades, conferencias locales, internacionales, y en donde tendremos la oportunidad de reflexionar sobre el reordenamiento de los patrones de la imagen. Agradecer a las instancias administrativas de producción y desarrollo de Conarte, a la presidencia, a la Secretaría Técnica, al director del Centro de las Artes, al maestro García Salazar, y bueno, y a todos ustedes por acompañarnos. El apoyo de la comunidad de fotografía en la persona de Yolanda Leal fue fundamental para llegar en esta ocasión a nuestro 19 Encuentro de Fotografía. Sin más preámbulos, me voy a permitir leer el currículo, de amplio currículum. Voy a hacer una semblanza, voy a tomar factores más relevantes de nuestra primera conferencista, Susan Bright, a quien le agradecemos su participación, la cual es fundamental para entender mucho de la fotografía contemporánea internacional, dadas sus aportaciones en diferentes libros que ahorita voy a mencionar. Así las cosas, pues bueno, puntualizar también que esta conferencia será en inglés, lo cual les agradezco su participación, y asimismo estará el área para en dado momento hacer algún comentario o particular, alguna pregunta al finalizar la plática, la lectura, la conferencia de Susan Bright. Bueno, muy amables por estar aquí. Y Susan Bright es curadora y escritora británico-australiana, radicada en Londres, doctora en comisariado de exposiciones por el Goldsmiths University de Londres, y se ha encargado de exposiciones internacionales en instituciones como el Tate Britain, the National Portrait Gallery en Londres y el The Museum of Contemporary Photography en Chicago, entre muchos más. Entre sus títulos publicados, y que muchos de ustedes reconocerán o han sido también el apoyo inclusive para varios de ustedes como propuesta de los discursos o de los proyectos conceptuales de producción que tienen. Entre ellos incluye el Photography Decoded en el 2019, Feast for the Eyes, The Story of Food in Photography del 2017, Home Truths, Photography and Motherhood del 2013, Autofocus, The Self-Portrait in Contemporary Photography del 2010, How We Are Photographing Britain en el 2007, Face of Fashion del 2007 y Art Photography Now del 2005, con el cual inicia su producción de exposiciones, curadurías y sobre todo libros, que algunos de ellos, como este que cité al último, pero que cuando muchos otros libros estaban hablando de la confusión de géneros en fotografía, pues Susan se da a la tarea de investigar y proponer varias categorías sumadas a la que ya todos reconocemos en la fotografía, como es el retrato, el paisaje, la fotografía documental. Pues también ella proponía ya objetos, ciudad y otras más, los cuales ha sido fundamental, lo sabemos ahora, en la fotografía contemporánea que nos ha acompañado estos últimos años. Sin más, agradezco la participación y el acompañamiento y el haber aceptado nuestra invitación a participar a Susan Bright, y la dejo con ustedes para que disfrutemos el inicio de esta fiesta de la fotografía en el 19 Encuentro aquí en Monterrey, auspiciado por Conarte y la Fototeca Nuevo León del Centro de las Artes. Bienvenida, Susan. Nice to meet you. Welcome to this festival, the 19 in Fototeca Nuevo León de Conarte. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Johan, for the introduction and for inviting me, and also to Eduardo and Eda for their technical help, which we needed earlier. So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to be, there we go, sharing the screen, and when I've finished, I'll go on to the call for the next slide. So just so you know. So I was asked to talk about international photography, which is a kind of huge and open brief. But the way I've decided to do that is to talk about two different festivals, recent festivals, that I've been asked to curate or co-curate in the case of one of them. And through that, discuss kind of the mechanics of a festival, how come they were so different, curating in a time of a pandemic, but also concentrate on the very different types of photography that were shown at either festival. So if we go to the next slide, the first festival I'd like to talk about is F-Stop, which I co-curated with Nina Strand, who is a Norwegian editor, artist, curator, all-round amazing person. And we were approached to with the relaunch of the festival. So this was the first time there had been international curators. They wanted the festival to be more outward looking. Of course, then the pandemic hit. So it was a weird experience for everybody, because we were working in a time where we didn't know if there was actually going to be a physical festival. So we had to think of all these things when we were putting it together. And so the theme that felt very pertinent and right to the time that we were working in was that of trust. You've got to remember, when we first were approached, this was the time that George Floyd was killed, Trump was in power, COVID was kicking off, I was experiencing Brexit, and all those big seismic shifts in society were underpinned by trust or a lack of trust. We had to, suddenly we couldn't really trust authority in the way that we had. Politicians were lying to us, we couldn't trust them, or we had to trust them, we didn't want to. With COVID, we didn't know if we could trust our friends or our family, had they been isolating. It just seemed to be absolutely the topic that we wanted or needed to address. So we go to the next slide. So F-Stop is a small festival in comparison with other festivals that I've worked on. And Nina and I our job was to really deal with the main space, which was the main kind of heart of the festival. And it was a very big space, but it was one exhibition. And as I said, because of the time that we were working in, we didn't want to kind of rely on that space because it might not have happened. So right from the beginning, as soon as we could, we wanted this festival to be a festival in progress, like showing all our ideas as they came along, what our thinking was, and it to be a rolling event rather than this kind of iceberg in the middle of the summer. So if we go to the next slide. So we did a digital aspect to that, to the physical festival as well. And this was called Digital Wandering. And the idea of this was to invite 2 people a month to discuss or share or think about or show work that revolved around the theme of trust. And this was really wide. We wanted scholars and artists and writers, all kinds of people to think about that concept, that idea, and or show work that in somehow revolved around the ideas of trust. And it was a really fantastic way as a curators to kind of pick apart that idea, because it's enormously complex. This is, if you go to the website of F-Stop, this is what you'll see for our digital wanderings, and they're all online still. You can go and read, you can go and watch, you can go and listen to all different types of ideas and concepts and thoughts around the theme of trust. If we go to the next slide. It's, as I said, it's a really super difficult theme. It might initially seem very easy, but it's very kind of elusive and expansive at the same time. You can't really measure it in the way that you can measure other things. It's not studied in the same way that, say, something like ethics has a discipline of its own. And it's something that comes across many, many different disciplines. So to research, you couldn't just kind of go to one source. You had to go across all different types of understanding of the term, and that could have been bioethics. We included an interview with a philosopher about trust in bioethics. This is about the haptic in video art, and that idea of trusting and touching, which actually became a theme of the festival, which was not surprising considering the time that we're living in. Next slide, please. So we right up to kind of really recently, before this opened in June, we weren't sure if it was going to happen in the physical space. And then we got the go ahead. Germany, it was at a moment when Germany was quite low and the festival could go ahead. There are lots of satellite editions. There were talks. There was all kinds of things for 10 days that went on around the heart of this exhibition that Nina and I did. I wasn't able to go because numbers in Britain were really high at the time. So I had to help Nina over FaceTime curate the exhibition. It's the second exhibition I've done over FaceTime, and it's not ideal by any stretch of the imagination, not just because it's tricky, but because, you know, installing is, for me, a really crucial part of understanding the objects, making the links that perhaps you wouldn't have done on paper. It kind of pulls you out of the abstract and puts you right into that moment. And it really is kind of the highlight of curating. So it was really sad for me not to be able to attend that installation. But Nina did an amazing job. And we were both really happy with the way that it looked. So to kind of start talking about some of the art that we included in the show, if we go to the next slide. So it started from the space. As you can see, it's a really beautiful, big space, really big. And it's an old warehouse. It's on in a complex, which was a wool factory, where all the different spaces are for the display of art, and there's a cinema, and it's a really fantastic area in Leipzig. And you're kind of initially, this was way back in 2019, September, we did have a site visit, and you're kind of faced with this huge empty space, and it's immediately we knew it was big enough to hold kind of solo shows in a way of each of the artists that we would choose. And that's what we wanted. We weren't going to mix things up. We wanted to have big spaces for each artist where the viewer could really kind of see a lot by that artist. They could see the whole series. If it was done in series, they could slow down. They could make the connections themselves. It didn't need to be didactic. And that's a really great position to be in. We could get a lot of work in there. We didn't have to crowd it because the space held its own so well. So that's how we went about choosing, thinking about how to install the artist. Then if we go to the next slide, just thinking about who we invited to be part of that. We wanted very different approaches to this theme of trust. We wanted very different types of photography. We wanted to kind of, as the viewer went around, to think about how, as I said, how elastic this term is. And and to contemplate it rather than say, well, this is what it's about, because it's not really a term that, I don't kind of believe in absolute truths anyway, but it's not the term that you can really pin down in that way. So through the research, we came up with 2 different approaches to this theme, one being interpersonal trust, which is about people and culture, and interfirm trust, which is about organizational or institutional. And the artists that we work with really sort of dealt with both the very, very personal and also the institutional. So Victoria Binchcock, who we can see here with her work Network Images, was an artist we got on really early on. We both really liked the work. We were in utter agreement about it. From a series called Networked Images. So if you go to the next slide, this is an ongoing project, and it is around that idea of the social circulation of images, not just what they show, but how they belong, where they behave, their cultural circulation. And the fact that this idea of authorship was really interesting here, that you have to trust when you make a search on the internet that what you get is right. And of course, that search shifts and changes and edits all the time, depending on what you've just searched for, what you've just bought, whether you're sitting at home or in the library. And it's like everything is built on kind of quicksand. And this is what Victoria's kind of interested in. And also the fact that her generation was very much brought up on the internet. So it's although for us, it might, my ancient self, it might feel like it's built on quicksand. For her, it just feels completely normal. And there isn't that kind of split between real life and digital life. It's all together. So what she does is think about how Google Images the algorithms put pictures together. And you can do this and see this very simply. If you Google yourself and then put image, you get a little kind of mini biography. And it's weird and it's funny. And sometimes you've got these strange things thrown in, especially if you have a name like Bright. I get pictures of suns and things as well. And it always kind of amuses me. So what Victoria has done is to make these clusters of pictures, which she has put in a picture to Google Image, and then Google Image produces all the others, and she makes these combinations. So if we go to the next slide, it's not about the individual image at all. It's about the connections, both visual, often linguistic as well. They're kind of like this one here that we can see in the front, white lines. She sort of jokes around. They're often funny. I find them really funny. It might just be me, but often melancholic as well. So we wanted to think about the kind of materiality of those images, because we experience those as images, not photographs. So that's why you can see there, we wanted people to walk around the image and feel the physicality of an image that you would only or a combination that you would only ever experience on screen. So they're very physical objects, and that's really, really important to her. If we go to the next slide. Another artist was Hoda Afshar, who is Iranian but works in Australia. And I had been aware of her work for a while, been kind of quietly following what she'd done. And so initially we wanted her to be on the Digital Wanderings. That was the name of our online project. And then when we talked to her, she showed us this new work, Speak the Wind, and both Nida and I immediately knew that we wanted her in the show. And in relation to trust, it was this idea of faith that I think hooked us in so much, because in all the kind of writing that we had read about trust, this idea of intrafirm or interpersonal, it didn't really deal with the spiritual or this idea of faith, which is absolute trust in a way. So just to explain a little about the project, it's I use the term documentary, but rather tentatively, because it kind of expands and pushes out of that term. So the work is taken in islands off the Straits of Hormuz near the southern coast of Iran. And it's on these islands, there's a belief that the winds can possess you. And they're a kind of evil or possessed spirit. And you have to once you're possessed, you have to have that spirit taken out of you by shamans. So over a period of 5 years, Hoda went to the islands and photographs the landscape, the people, the shamans, the ceremonies. These islands have a history of colonialism and slavery from all different parts of the world. And those kind of cultural ideas are kind of being channeled through the spirits into the wind. The book was coming out the same time as the exhibition, and because in a festival you have to think quickly, you have to be light on your feet, we decided to show a slideshow of this project. So if we go to the next slide. We've got this beautiful installation of the landscapes, which have this very unearthly quality about them. And this, I think, really helps to add to this element of kind of magic realism or storytelling, which yanks them out of the documentary. There's no thoughts of witness here. There's absolutely one of collaboration and sharing and playing a part. There's a theatricality in a way, or performance with the work as well. It was really nice to have it as a slideshow because you were absorbed in it, a bit like, being in the wind. It was kind of all around you. You had to kind of look from picture to picture. You couldn't read it in a logical way. You had to kind of immerse yourself in the same way that Hoda had to immerse herself in as a photographer. If we go to the next slide. So what I love about this installation is that we had the landscapes there as you came into the building, and this is the first thing you saw was these beautiful black and white landscapes, which contrasted so greatly with the rather more kind of less organic shapes opposite by Carmen Winant, which I'll talk about now. So next slide, please. So Carmen is an American artist who works with collage. And we knew, this is very early on, we knew that we wanted Carmen in the show. We wanted her to do something specifically for the festival. And we always wanted her to do something outside of the exhibition as a city-wide commission, which we were able to do, as well as have her work in the exhibition itself. So if you go to the next slide. So again, when you're commissioning, there's a really big sense of trust, because we didn't know as curators what she was going to do. We gave her a brief, but that was it. This festival is about trust. And it's kind of left it to her. And what she came up with was looking at actresses' hands. And it started off by a collection of books about Marlene Dietrich, who's a very expressive actress with her hands. And she just collects things, and went to these and cut out the various gestures throughout the collection. So if we go to the next slide, we were able then to make these into posters and put them throughout the city. And we didn't know where they were going to be. So this was another kind of great surprise. When Nina was in Leipzig, she would sort of stumble across these posters in the as they were called, city light boards that ran throughout the city. And we really like the idea of actress acting and trust, because as an audience you have to trust the actor, and as an actor you have to trust that character that you're going into. It's a very shape-shifting situation depending on your context, and it was this idea of it slipping and sliding that we really liked. As you can see, this motif of hands was something that reoccurred. This is not something that we had kind of foreseen. But again, as I said, considering the time and issues of touch and what we can touch and what we can't touch, and the trust enabled in that, it wasn't surprising that it did come up as a theme. So if you go to the next slide. This is work by Guanyu Xu from China, lives and works in the States. And again, this is something that comes up in installation. And it was this idea of collage that suddenly I was aware of, but it wasn't until I saw over the screen Carmen, Jianghu and Victoria kind of all together, that there was this kind of idea of shifting and changing and thinking about what collage can look like and how different it can be. And it's not just kind of cutting and pasting, it's a variety of things. And are they more truthful or not truthful? How does the idea of collaging something shift the way that you read something as truthful? This is and something you can trust. This is really pertinent with this series, Resident Aliens, where Guanyu was working with recent people coming to the States and waiting for their identity and their status to be resolved. Again, you've got to remember that this was the time of Trump. It was not as easy as one might think to immigrate. And he asked if he could go into their spaces, and he would put their belongings up, sort of make a pinboard, if you like, of all their belongings and photographs of their belongings, and re-photograph the room in a way that showed them fully, in a way that actually forms, numbers, pictures that they had to produce of to make sure that they were authentically married, and their past. Why were those trustworthy but these not trustworthy? Just because they look different, but in fact they're more human than the conditions needed to immigrate. If we go to the next slide. And this was a series that followed on from Temporary Censored Home, where he, in the same methodology, went back as a gay man to his parents' flat in China and put his own identity, his gay identity, onto that space, which is perhaps not approved of or considered or really believed in a way. So this idea of making or constructing an image in order to tell you more than a straight documentary photograph could ever do. If we go to the next slide. And here you can see it in installation. I just love these installation shots so much because it was such a beautiful space. So I've kind of indulged me whilst I show them. So another artist from that show, if we go to the next slide, is Laure Provost, who is a French artist who's not known as a photographer. She works in all different mediums. I always think of her as a sculptor or an installation artist. And we showed 2 videos of hers, which I feel really kind of tapped absolutely into the current time and really highlighted how differently we read artworks post, or not post, we're not post-COVID, but kind of in a pandemic, how that is the mirror that we look at art through now. It's really strange what it's done to our looking and how we consider works of art. This was a video done in 2019, and it is exactly as it says in the title. It's a love letter to a fellow artwork. And as she's talking, she's saying how much she loves the artwork, how much she would take care of it. So it's one artwork talking to another. This was put on her website, right sort of at the height of the pandemic. And it was really like a soothing balm. It was really, it brought up a lot of things. It felt that you were being looked after as a person, but also that idea of how we experience art on the screen and in real life, and how much we were all missing that extraordinary encounter of being in front of an object. So if we go to the next slide, that piece, you can see there on that monitor, has to be shown opposite another piece of art. So if you go to the next slide, we put it opposite Whitney Hubbs, who was part of our digital wandering program, and doing a kind of amazing project of self-portraiture. And the law was opposite Whitney, and it was kind of even more poignant because Whitney's work is about aging and self-representing isolation, loneliness, and Law was looking after her. It was a really beautiful juxtaposition. We were lucky enough, because the space was so big, to have a little corner that we could put publications from the digital wanderings into the exhibition space. So they kind of linked the two kind of aspects of the festival for us together. So that was a really nice thing that we'd be able to do, and to bring the artists that had only had a chance to be online into the space as well. So if we go to the next slide, and this is a kind of parting shot of the exhibition. So that's one kind of festival that I've been involved with as a co-curator, invited in. You've got the kind of concept and form of the festival to shape and make your own. It was a small festival, about 3,000 people came though over the 10 days. So in a pandemic, that's pretty impressive, and we were really pleased with that. But it really compares, you can see what a different kind of way of curating, a different way of thinking, and a different way of, that festivals can take shape in comparison with the next one I'm going to talk about. So if we go to the next slide, this is pre-pandemic. This was an exhibition that I did with Elina Brutheris, who is a Finnish artist, in, really bad with dates, I think it's around 2018. This was in Salakias Museum in northern Finland. Again, very big space. I tend to work in very large spaces. And this was site specific. It was a period of Elina's work that was very upbeat, very funny, very away from the autobiographical and back into the art historical, which she tends to do with her work. I mention it purely because it was kind of the catalyst for the next festival that I worked on. If we go to the next slide, which was photos. Oh, sorry, that's just an installation shot. I just want you to have a look at the design, actually, which is really important. It was very playful. It was very colorful. And that was something that we wanted to kind of carry through as the exhibition toured. So if we go to the next slide. So as I said, that we wanted the exhibition to tour. So I contacted Foto España in Madrid and said, we've got this great exhibition. Would you like to show it at Foto España? Which I love. It's absolutely my favorite photography festival. I've been going for years and years and years, since the early 2000s. And they responded by inviting me to be the guest curator of that year, which is probably the best email you can get. The condition being that Elina's show was to be one of the 5 exhibitions that I curated, which was amazing, of course, a brilliant and lovely opportunity to think about, if you bring that exhibition in, how can you build a program around the themes and ideas that are in one artist's work? So a kind of different way of, in comparison with Leipzig, which started with the big theme and then we drilled down, this was kind of the other way around. So if we go to the next slide, as I said, I wanted to bring that idea of the installation over into the show in Madrid. So whereas the other show was site specific, my role as a curator there was to go through the vast amount of work that Elina had done, talking about 300 to 500 images, and kind of edit them into bodies of work or themes that would make sense in physical space. I then had to kind of take that idea that fitted that museum so perfectly and kind of rearrange it and shuffle it into this space so that it made coherent sense as you were going around as a viewer in another space. That's a really fun and wonderful problem to have. So the ideas were carried through, some of the themes shifted and changed, some of the work was dropped because it wasn't quite as big. And we were in this really wonderful big art center in the middle of the city with a very tricky black floor, as you can see. So if we move to the next slide. So the theme, so after, you know, there was a lot going on in this work of Elina's, and I could have really taken my programming any way from it. But what I really wanted to do was to bring in other artists that looked back at art history in some kind of way. There was this idea of kind of photography not being of the now, of the minute, not being showing an event, or it was this idea of photography that worked backwards, referenced backwards to become very contemporary. This idea of art history reworking and working itself again. This idea that photography is a continuum. It doesn't just stop once you take the picture. It evolves, and it's like an event, and it moves and it shifts and it changes all the time. I wanted to think about how photography communicates through generations or communicates in another way. So often it really wasn't about the image itself, but about all the things that kind of went around it in that way. So this was really the piece that got me thinking about photography in that way. And it's the lighting piece after Yoko Ono. The work that I showed of Elina's takes its influence from Fluxus, which was a very short-lived, very exciting period in the late 50s and 60s, which was a very loose group of artists that believed that anyone could be an artist. You just gave them instructions and they could do it. So here is Elina's version of the lighting piece. You don't ever need to see Yoko Ono's, because this piece is just as important as Yoko Ono's, and everyone else that has done it as well. This idea of authorship kind of gets a little shattered too, which is something I was interested in, and you'll see comes up in a lot of the other work that I selected. So if we go to the next slide. So most obviously this idea of returning to art history can be seen in the work of Sharon Corr. And what Sharon does, if you look at this picture initially, you think, oh, it's a copy of a painting. But it's much more interesting than that. It's much more complex, and thinking about ideas of reproduction and where photography's role is in that. And just to go to the next slide, just to show you this piece as well, which is an earlier piece of work from the series Early American. And if we think about, sorry, the name of the painter who painted this is gone from my head, and I do apologize, but he was an American, and he was creating works of art very much based on European paintings, but he had not gone to Europe to see them, to copy them. So it was this idea of how do you copy something, and what is lost along the way and what is gained along the way when you reproduce work. And if you think about where we experience most art now, it's through the internet. It used to be books, now it's internet. If I want to see a painting, I Google it, up it comes. Do the Google image search, they're all going to be different. So if you go to the next slide, Sharon's work, you think it looks a certain way, but it doesn't, because it's based on this idea of reproduction. And so it's a photograph of a painting or a sculpture that we see here. So if we go to the next slide. So when you see, so initially, and then what's really interesting is because we're seeing these on the screen, the kind of imperfections have been smoothed out, and they look absolutely perfect. But there's a kind of weirdness to them, because where she might have copied them off a picture of the internet, where the lighting might be strange or the focus slightly different. So there's a little edge to them, even though they're very kind of seductive in a way. She grows all her own flowers. She makes the furniture, so they're absolutely perfect. So it's a slow process, which really mirrors that of painting. And I really loved the flowers because they're a bit like photography itself. They're kind of the lowest of the genre paintings, in the way that photography is always often seen as the lowest form of all the fine arts. So what I did for the show was to combine her work with Laura Latinsky. So if we go to the next slide, to think about this idea of still life and its place within art history and within photography. Laura Latinsky is probably more known for these much more realistic still lives, where there's a kind of story or a narrative being played out in the picture. You can see here the lollipop that's being licked. So you immediately kind of, your head starts spinning to children, and you can work with that. But the work that I showed is more recent. So if we go to the next slide, you can see she's totally deconstructed that space. It's about plane, it's about space, it's about culture and desire, which I think Sharon's also is as well. And still life, full stop, is often about desire. And on the other side, this kind of flip side of revulsion as well. And it's that tension between the two that I really wanted to play with, both as artists together, that you first kind of look at the picture and you go, oh my God, that's amazing. And then you realize that something is a little bit off. So if we go to the next slide, with Laura's work, you can see that she's taking pictures from magazines. It's her own body. It's her old pieces of art that she's repurposing and putting back in. Some of the pictures are from things like Martha Stewart, which are about aspiration, and really dealing with those ideas of where we learn our culture from, where we learn ideas of value and taste and aesthetics all together. So if we go to the next slide. And it was this picture here that really gave me the idea for the installation. So you can see that pink in those vases. They're vases, I'm not sure they are. They're just obviously there. I really loved that pink. So I picked out that pink. And if you go to the next slide, for the color of the room, it's in the Musée du Romantisimo, which was a private house, which was gorgeous and opulent. So this was in a room that they have for temporary exhibitions, and I wanted to mirror kind of opulence in the pink as well. Sharon's flower paintings pictures are dated from paintings at the same time as the house as well, so that I don't like exhibitions that aren't somehow connected to site. For me, that's kind of important. And this room was really like, you walked in and you just went, oh, and then it was like, after a while it felt kind of cloying and a little bit too much, which is absolutely what I wanted to have, because I thought the pictures had that same kind of effect as well. So that was another show that I did. So if we go to the next slide, I'll speed up. I see that time is ticking. It's another installation shot. And the next exhibition is Claire Strand. And so what this work does is deal with, like Sharon called, ideas of what is lost in reproduction and communication. It deals with painting, which is, again, this idea of kind of going back to other art historical moments, and communication. So it needs a little bit of explaining. So if we go to the next slide. How this was set up, this was done in whilst Claire was on a residency in Paris and her husband was in Britain. And she asked him to go into her archive of photographs, of tabloid photographs, and grid them up, as you can see here, with 1 being white, 10 being black, and all shades of grey in between that. If you go to the next slide, she would then, over the phone, he would go read the grid off. She would grid up a piece of paper in exactly the same amount of squares, and he would read off a number and she would paint that square. So what you've got, she's not a painter. She's the first one to admit that this was really kind of an arduous project for her. And she didn't know what she was painting until she could stand back and kind of, it would materialize. So if you go to the next slide, you can see in the background there, the paintings, and actually the effect, especially once you've got them turned back into photographs again or back into images again, is they actually really look like pixelated digital photographs. And so the way we displayed them was to have the painting on one side and the photographs on the other. So you could kind of, you know, match up, you would get the game, as it were. And the showcases, which were visual representations of ways of communicating information. If you go to the next slide, you can see here these charts that were shown on overhead projectors and projected onto the wall. And again, this idea of going back, these old ways of viewing photography, understanding imagery, is something that reverberated in kind of a lot of the shows as well. The curator that I was working with, the in-house curator, was very young, and she didn't really know what an overhead projector was, which made us all feel very old, for those that had gone to university with these. And also in the next exhibition as well, these slide viewers. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, this is Delio Jassé, who's from an Angolan artist who now lives in Italy, but produces work whilst living in Portugal. And again, some of the ideas that we've seen kind of reverberating, this idea of painting, this idea of archive, this idea of reworking archives, we can see in Delio's work as well. So if we go to the next slide. And what Delio found he was experiencing in Lisbon was the fact that Lisbon is now a very expensive and desirable place to live, and lots of people can't afford to live there. So the flea markets are full of people's belongings, and he would go to the markets and he found boxes of lives, if you like, of families that had gone to live in Angola and also in Mozambique in the Portuguese colonies, and had created these lives which were very far removed from those of the Angolans and those from Mozambique. And the black presence is almost erased, or just sort of in the background of the images. So he copied the images and then screen printed new pictures, which he then puts kind of his own stamps on them from the official stamps that he found in the boxes, be that from passports or visas, and created these new documents, again, like a kind of palimpsest where you read all the layers. And again, sort of this idea of something is more truthful or more, not truthful, but more, explains more, even though it's elliptical or less straightforward to understand. Go to the next image. This is the work done in Mozambique, which is really strange. It's hard to read. It's I think, an architect's office, which was set up. They're very staged, strange images, which he's done the same treatment with. And what I love about them is he was working with liquid light, so you could really see the hand of the artist in there, in the same way that you can with Claire. That idea of painting kind of coming through and being renewed again in the history of photography. You go to the next slide. And we included in the exhibition slideshows, and also these viewers where just one slide is in there. So there's this kind of abrupt stop point as well with the images. This idea of antiquated or old-fashioned ways of showing photography returning and becoming relevant again. So we're going to talk quickly about the last artist. So next slide, Patrick Pound, who is born in New Zealand and works in Australia. And he's really a collector and a curator. It's really interesting to work with an artist whose practice is curatorial, because it throws up all kinds of issues about what my role would be, and what a curator does and their function. And he had, for the collection, for what was on show, which might make sense if we go to the next slide, was at this incredible museum of a collector. And again, it was like, it made perfect sense to put Patrick in this beautiful museum of somebody who collected something with the same kinds of obsessions and passions of gathering, of ownership, of editing, or grouping in the same way that Patrick has. So if we go to the next slide, what we did here was Patrick was able to select work from the collection, not work that was on show, but the work that was in the hold. And what he did was pick out everything that had to do with air. So we have some beautiful Goya etchings. We have all kinds of amazing objects, which he then built a collection around. So this was, again, it's site specific. It's absolutely pertinent to the pieces that he selected from the museum. And then he built this kind of, these bubbles coming out from the works of art around ideas of air, which is kind of folly because you can't kind of photograph it because it's invisible. So it was this lovely idea of what you can reproduce and what you can't photograph, and again, that role of photography, and what's its role in showing something that can't actually be photographed. So if we go to the next slide. And the next. He also works with objects as well. And he very often works, he always works with algorithms. So he buys mainly off eBay, but also a lot of other sites as well. And things will lead, the algorithms will lead him on. So he gets this kind of, a bit like Victoria, who I showed you first of all, gets these strange juxtapositions. So on these tables, he would put objects which they were like puzzles, really. They could, you had to kind of work out where the algorithm had taken him with his objects. So, for example, when thinking about air, he wanted to have a pan flute, and then the algorithm suggested he might want a fluted pan, which is a pan with an edge like this. So those two things were put together. So again, it's kind of funny. It's a challenge. It's taxing on the brain, and all immersive when you're in the exhibition, trying to work out those connections, but also just, again, allowing yourself to slow down and look and figure those out, which is something that I wanted to do in both festivals. It's often it's not about quick looking. It's about really taking in and thinking things through. If you go to the next slide. So you can see in these vitrines, he also showed in these old files that you put in filing cabinets as well. And this is what I meant by installation. You always learn something from installation. I hadn't really factored in the way that a lot of the photography was shown through these old-fashioned methods of display until I was installing. And it was like, oh yeah, you always make these incredible connections. Even today, right now, talking about these two festivals together, which I've never done, I've suddenly sort of noticed knots, strings that I can pull and tie together, which I hadn't before. So it's always good to talk through your projects and to think about them as exhibition spaces rather than just artists and their work. And so to finish, if we go to the next slide, this is just my finishing slide. I'm really bad at endings. So I just put this up because just to show you that the themes of the exhibitions, both Trust and Photo España, kind of go through all. It's not just the exhibitions, it's also, the website and the brochure and the catalogue. And so it kind of spills out into the city and beyond, which is, for me, the great joy is that what you've done doesn't just exist in that short period of time, but actually has an afterlife as well. So thank you. I think now the idea is to open it up to see if there's any questions.
Well, it was really nice, your speech. We loved. Between something came in questions, I will talk or say that the last that you said that the house goes, the project that finish in catalog, but have a different and a lot of process, different methods, different process. And I know in different project or different town or different person, that will change. But what of that process do you love more, or in your specific, or what is your specific intuition or way to your research or your work?
Okay, this question always comes up. It changes every single project. Sometimes, like for Photo España, it starts with an artist, and then I go out. And like in Leipzig, it starts with a theme, and you go in, and it really depends on the project. I tend to look very wide, and then edit down and edit down and edit down until it kind of works. It's really intuitive, I have to say. Yes, the thinking is there, but often the thinking comes later, or somebody else points it out, and I'm like, oh yeah. So it's really weirdly intuitive for me. It's the best part, that research.
Great, great. I think others say that gonna put some other. Here's a question. Una vez que tienes, let me translate.
Sorry, Spanish is bad.
When you got the pieces to the show,
Yeah.
how you control the flow of by the traffic of the attention of the visitant?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I've been to so many exhibitions that it's really bad. And you kind of, people put panels straight where people come in and everyone gets crowded. Yeah, so you have to really think about the space. You have to imagine or put yourself in the space and think about the flow. I mean, I've been doing it a long time now, so people tend to go certain ways around rooms. And so you tend to put your panel in a way that you know that people go. Not always possible, but that's what you do, and how much space to leave and that kind of thing. And to spread the information out so that you don't get kind of bottlenecks. But you never know, people do weird stuff, so you just do what you know and that you have learned from experience, and things shift and change all the time. You have to be really flexible.
Great. Other question. Dalia Gutierrez, Dalia Gutierrez from a newspaper here. How well do you see that? How would you describe contemporary photography?
I can't. It's such a big question. It's like, how do you describe contemporary literature? And I often relate photography back to literature because I think they're really similar in lots of ways. It's such a broad subject, area now. And it's not just artists, it's you and me as well as contemporary photography. We all take pictures. So, you can kind of see that some people are doing this, and this is really interesting at the moment. And there's lots of concern about this kind of thing.
But even excuse me, Susan, but even I think in your lecture, in your speech, in your conference, you let us know that how it goes, because sometimes it's the photo, sometimes it's the installation, sometimes goes the relation with anthropology or the same art of photography.
Yeah, but that's my interest. I like photography because it's very, very wide. And I don't think of it as a narrow medium. I think of it as a medium that can kind of do anything. So that's what kind of keeps me interested. But there are people who are very into photojournalism or reportage who just think that that's photography, and that's fine, but that's not how I approach photography. I would lose interest very quickly if I only read. It's like only reading memoir, but you read all kinds of books.
Yes.
So
no, and so for your work, we will be interested that the people know you, because of that goes our 19 Festival de Fotografía, 19 Encuentro de Fotografía. How the photograph, contemporary photograph, goes to all these different ways, right?
Yeah. I don't know what to say apart from yeah.
Well, there's another question. I think the same girl.
Yeah, it's good. The question is, what is the importance and the role of photography in the society? Crucial. I mean, every day we just thinking of the news. I mean, we wouldn't have it's how we understand the world now. I really do believe that. Even if you're just flicking through the news, you look at the pictures, and then it's the pictures that make you read the news. So it's so sewn in to our society now. It's you know, we see thousands of images a day probably now. You know, I've seen more images in my life than my parents, you know, in this month than probably my parents saw in the whole of their lives. You know, it's like air. You know, we kind of take it for granted. So yeah, it's inseparable actually.
Yes. Eric Garza Morales, there's another question for you.
Yeah, where do you draw the line as a curator between the artist's ideas and yours? Okay, there's kind of two questions here, so I'll answer the first question. Well, I always follow the art. I guess that's the first thing. If I have an idea, like trust, then we look. Nina and I looked at the artist's work. I might have an idea. My ideas kind of evolved. I'm not that kind of curator that goes, oh, I'm going to have this idea, and then I try and fit the art in. It doesn't work like that. I always, you know, the art comes first. And my ideas change and evolve around what I find. And the second question, what's the difference between a curator and an artist that's approaching another artist's work? I think that question is, are artist curators different from curators, maybe? I don't know. Sorry, what's the difference between a curator, and an artist that's appropriating another artist's work? Completely different. A curator, I think, is more of like a translator, an interpreter, storyteller, educator, DJ, you know, producer, that kind of role. And an artist appropriating somebody else's work is doing appropriation work. Totally different skills.
Anders Villagómez, que enviamos saludos y les agradezco por sus preguntas. I love that you make these questions. Is really good for the reflection about it is what we're doing. Go ahead, Susan, please.
Okay, if image perception changes at time that technology and society does, what's next for photography? I don't know, because I learned very early on not to predict the future. I'm really bad at it. You never know, you know, you just have to, you're in it. If you're in the middle of something, it's really hard. I can kind of, you know, see what's going on around me, but I can't see what's in the future. And I'm kind of glad of that.
And we can be in the present and go to the past. And with this idea, I will take what I had here, some notes in the ink about the next. What about if you talk us about Laura Letinsky, and so I will put in the same ideas the work of Ana Casas Broda. Laura Letinsky, you let us know her about in 2005 with your photography now.
Yeah.
And then few years later, you did this excellent work of Feast for Your Eyes. How the work of Laura Letinsky with food make you concentrate and put all of us knows that is common now that everybody make a shot of what we're eating and stuff like that. But how you make that fix? As same happens with if you work with Ana Casas with the motherhood, and then you do other work of big work of motherhood.
Yeah, I guess the food and the motherhood are similar in that way that I like topics that are seemingly very easy, like trust, motherhood, food, but actually are very complex. And once you start kind of digging, they become really, they become very wide. And my approach to the project on motherhood was about this idea of a push and pull of emotions. So Anna's work was perfect, completely perfect for that. That was 12 artists in the exhibition. It was also my PhD as well. So it was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about and studying, researching. And the food might seem completely different, but it's really not. It's this kind of idea of
and research of the history of photo, no, with the
it was the history that had not been written. It was a lot of commercial work. It was much dismissed, and it's not about food at all. It's about aspiration, cultural identity. It's about coming together as a community. It's about all these very complex things. So art history as well, which is where Laura comes into it as well. And it's not that I always work with the same artists at all. It's just that, someone's like Laura's work is very far reaching. So I can pull on it for different contexts.
Nice.
Which is the kind of photography, as I said, that I'm attracted to. That work that is more elusive in a way.
Great, Susan. Well, thanks a lot. We'll enjoy and I appreciate your participation here in this festival, in this Encuentro 19 de Fotografía. Para todos, les agradezco su presencia y los invito en la noche. Bueno, at night we go to the festival and got the inauguration of this exhibition, Imágenes Emergentes, and then tomorrow, Thursday, we got at the same hour the conference with the director of the Fototeca de México, Juan Carlos Valdés Marín, y continuaremos con pláticas en Zoom a las 4, a las 6 de la tarde, y a las 8 de la noche, 8:30, at the 8:30 at night, we'll have this book jockey session with Alejandro Cartagena, and my supervision here tell me that we got 15 places. So the people that was in this, let us know to pick in the list in the door to be our hosts or invitated. Susan Bright, nice to meet you. Nice to see you here. Thanks a lot, and we hope we see you later soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and good luck with the festival.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. And thank you everyone who tuned in. Thank you. Bye.